Can I have some lights so I can see people? Yes, right. Everybody stand up. Come up. You've been sitting down for far too long, and it's like, I think there's 2 more presentations after me. Right, you can now sit down again. Okay. 20 minutes, 10 reasons. Dead easy. If I can do it shorter, you can buy me a beer later in the bar, okay? Get you out of here and get you talking and networking with people. So, this is a top 10. I've got to look this way. Of what I think are the reasons why you should consider doing an accelerator. But also the one thing I would say to you is just think about this as potentially, these are the top 10 reasons or things that you need to think about as a startup at an early stage. So it can equally apply to that. And you can find them, it just happens to be inside an accelerator in this, but it could equally apply to lots of different things. So, the first and obvious one is, number 10 is money. Money is probably the least important reason why you should do an accelerator. If you go and do an accelerator for money, you're probably doing it for the wrong reason. Yeah? We believe that money represents, actually, interestingly, about 10% of the inherent value of being in a program itself. And actually, as a result, it's not unknown for us to have businesses in our program that have already raised money, because that's not what they're there to do. Actually, on average, about half of the businesses come into our program, have money, and typically have raised almost $500,000. Now, that's not normal for most accelerators, but that's the same for us. Perks. The wonderful thing that we have is because we have a massive inbound, and it's highly competitive to get into most accelerators, the way large corporates such as PayPal, Google, Amazon, all think about how they deliver free perks to startups is actually they give everybody like $30, and then they give people like Techstars $100,000 per startup. So there is actually a massive amount of freebies, perks that come with programs themselves, which can actually have a really meaningful impact. Also, for someone like us, which are based in London, we actually give teams upward of 9 months of free space. Or if we charge at a very, very small amount of money. And that can make a real impact. So whatever money you do have, you're not spending it on things that you shouldn't be spending money on. Classes. This is kind of one of those weird things that people think about. People think about you go on an accelerator, you go and sit in classrooms and you do workshops. Actually, we don't. We do, I think, 15, 30-minute sessions on topics. And it's more to do with thinking about topics rather than teaching people about topics. Everything we do and everything that a good accelerator should do should be one-to-one support, not let's go back to the classrooms. I mean, who enjoyed school and thought that classrooms and having 30 people in a room was a valuable way to actually learn? It's a very homogeneous process. And so the idea of like everybody's at the same place doing the same thing at the same time is complete bullshit. Yeah? It's actually everybody is doing something different. Everybody is in a different subject because, by the way, if you're all doing the same thing, you would probably be competing with each other. Yeah? We're actually, when we pick 10 teams, we're actually picking a really distributed set of teams from different sectors doing different things. So classes are actually valuable in some ways, but actually it's kind of adds a very, very small amount of value. Efficiency. I think this is one of the things I thought was really, really valuable initially. One of the things I noticed was if you were a startup and you wanted to speak to a VC, it was really hard. And typically the response was, yes, I can see you in 6 weeks in this 30-minute slot, and you need to come to London. Yeah? One of the things that's really interesting is if you think about Accelerator as a honeypot, lots of really interesting startups all together at the same time, you can suddenly flip the whole thing upside down. Suddenly you're in a position where you can demand people come to you rather than the other way around. And that's what I mean by efficiency. So one of the things that you get is, instead of having to go and meet everybody else, actually you sit in the middle and everybody comes to you, which is incredible. It means you can meet more people in shorter spaces of time. It means that they come to you. It means that you can meet people that you wouldn't ordinarily do, because guess what? There's 10 amazing startups in the same room at the same time. Honesty. Honesty. How many people have asked for advice from someone? And ordinarily the answer is something like, ooh, that's interesting. And that's probably as much feedback as you've got. The one thing I would argue Europeans, actually the British, are awful at this, is they hate insulting people. They hate offending people. Like if you go back 150 years, like the British Empire was pretty big. Yeah? It was kind of all over the place. And the only reason that happened was because we were really diplomatic. Diplomatic means that even if you hate somebody, that you're nice to them. Yeah? I think that mentors and startups sometimes can be a little bit too prim and proper. And when you think an idea is really stupid, how often do you hear somebody say, that's the worst fucking idea I've ever heard in my life? Yeah? That never happens. Yeah? The one thing that you can have inside something like an accelerator is brutal honesty. Yeah? Because you're actually there to learn. You never learn anything from somebody telling you all the amazing things you're doing. What you actually want to find out is, what are the things that are going to break inside my business? Why is my business not going to be completely awesome? And that typically means you're probably going to get criticized a little bit. So accelerators are an amazing place to get people to give you honest feedback about what is good and, more importantly, what is terrible about your startup. And just as a piece of advice, when you ask somebody or you're pitching your business, after you've pitched your business, the first thing you should then say to them is, tell me why my business is not going to work. Yeah? Try and get feedback about all of the reasons why it's not going to work. Because your job is to defy death. As Mick describes, you have to act like a cockroach and survive. But in the process of surviving, you have to learn. And you have to learn from brutal honesty from other people. Accountability. Once a week inside Techstars and most accelerators, you will be summoned to the headmaster's office. That's me. And what happens is you suddenly become accountable to a third party. It's easy for you to say, yeah, I know we didn't launch this week. It'll be done in a week's time. And then in a week's time, well, we didn't quite fix all the things we needed to fix. We'll do it in the week after. Suddenly being accountable to somebody else is really important. The problem with startups is you're not accountable to anybody apart from yourself. And I have been criticized that people say, oh no, I'm an amazing founder. I'm accountable to myself. Actually, bullshit. Most people are not very good at holding themselves to account. And that's why actually sometimes even at an early stage, having a good mentor or having a non-exec on your board is really good, because you suddenly become accountable to somebody else. And the process of being in a good accelerator is actually becoming accountable. And once a week, you've got to go to the headmaster's office and explain why all the things that you said you were going to do the week before, you haven't done. And then it gets really embarrassing, because every week you come in and go, yeah, I haven't done that either. And what actually happens is you suddenly become much better at setting meaningful goals. Yeah? So one is you become accountable, but the other one is you actually become much better at saying, actually in a week, we can do this. Yeah? and you learn what you can achieve versus having some unrealistic view about what you can and can't achieve. Introductions. Yeah, everybody knows this. The thing that an accelerator is really good at is you are part of a trusted network. And one of the things that is really much, much easier to do is I can make introductions because somebody's inside my program. I don't have to go through this process of saying, I've got this person that I know that's really good. Do you mind taking an introduction from them? More often than not, if it's coming from me and they're a Techstars team, or potentially in another accelerator, is your ability to get introductions happens much, much faster. In the process of the way Techstars work and lots of other programs is you have this thing called speed mentoring, where you sit down, you meet lots of different people. So let's give you some hints and tricks. So in that process of when you get those, you sit down with mentors or anybody, it doesn't have to be inside an accelerator, always follow up within 24 hours, preferably on the same day, and say, thank you very much for your time. And what you do is you write a short list of all of the things that were agreed. Yeah? Because what you tend to find is sometimes you'll have a mentor or somebody that you meet say, oh yeah, I can introduce you to A, B, C, or X, Y, Z. And guess what? They never appear. Yeah? If you set up an email which says, thanks for your time today. It was great to talk. I really look forward to speaking to ABC that you promised to make introductions to. And by the way, the feedback about X and Y was really great. If I send an email, and you do send an email afterwards, which says, can you please make the introductions? And there's a really good blog post written by a guy called Russell Buckley. If you look up Russell Buckley mentoring, it basically explains that what you do is you prepare a short email, which basically says, Dear X, Dear John, thank you for your time. Just to explain, this is the startup that we are, and this is what we're trying to do. And what then happens is it makes it really easy for me to make the introduction. Because then what I do is I say, thanks, add the person that you need to introduce, and say, see below. And so it just makes it really easy. So guess what? If I'm a mentor at an accelerator, I've met 10 teams, I've promised everybody 3 introductions. That's 30 introductions. Make it easy. But it's an amazing way to build your own personal network. And actually, one of the things I'd probably say is even if you aren't successful in a program, and sometimes guess what, you're not, actually the value of actually creating a trusted network around you for the startup you're in and all of the startups you'll be in at some point in the future, this is an amazing asset. This doesn't disappear just because your startup ends. Mentorship. Mentorship is what it says in the tin. This is actually learning from smart people who've been there and done it before and trying to shortcut all of those problems that you know that exist but you don't know the solution to. The amazing thing about mentorship is lots of different people have lots of different views. And one of the things you can do inside an accelerator is you can get lots of different points of view about how to fix problems. So you don't have to take, I know 3 people, so I'll ask 3 people and get their opinions. You can actually ask everybody. If you think about the mentor network as an extended function of your brain, and actually not having one brain thinking about something, but having 50 brains. That's the way you solve. Do you know, I described the thing I want to know is about all of the reasons why my business is going to fail. So you've now figured out all the reasons why they're going to fail. So the next thing you do is you need to ask them in reverse, I got this problem. How would you fix it? And then you get this really diverse mix of suggestions from lots of different people. And so therefore you can use it as an extended brain function to actually help you fix your problems as well. But also in that process, you're learning how to work with third parties, mentors, and actually starting to create meaningful relationships. The way you create a relationship with people is to fix problems together. Coffees are great at starting, but at the end of the day, having a thing to work on is actually the way you really create meaningful relationships. Cohort effect. Techstars, to give you some example, is run by 3 people in London. We have 10 teams. We have about 40 entrepreneurs that come along as part of that process. And then we've got about 100 mentors that sit around that. The cohort effect of having 40 really smart entrepreneurs in a room for 13 weeks is a hugely valuable asset. The way I think about it is, if you go and do an MBA, Harvard, Stanford, or wherever it might be, actually the value is not just knowing the tutor or the professors. The value is in knowing the other people in your class. And so therefore, one of the things you've got to think about is, if you have this selection process which identifies some really smart teams, one of the things we spend our life trying to persuade people is not just to listen to me, but to go and talk to the other people in the room, the other people who are participating in the program, who are massively valuable. So for example, Mick, who was in Techstars 2 programs ago, like someone who's built, sold, exited a business, is a huge resource, not just for me, but also for the other 9 teams which have actually been through the program itself. And so actually cohort effect, and cohorts don't disappear. What you end up having is, post-program, there's a bunch of people who have been through a shared experience that you will go on to know going forward, not just in the program, but far beyond. And finally, it's network. This is the single reason why you would want to be an accelerator, is actually plugging yourself into a massively extended and trusted network. This is inherently, we share it with you. And something like Techstars, and this is a pitch. No, it's not a pitch, but it's true. Techstars now has 18 programs. Half of those programs are with large corporates, including Disney, Sprint, Qualcomm, Barclays, Metro. You suddenly have unfair access to networks that other people wouldn't ordinarily have. Those are networks which have been put together over long, extended periods of time, and you're effectively invited into that process, and you suddenly become a trusted member of that network. And as I said before, these things don't disappear at the end of 13 weeks, but continue far beyond. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, John. Just stay with me 1 more second, we'll not let you go.
Oh, no.
I know that you answered questions already earlier,
Yeah.
so it's kind of unfair. But since we have to get our next speaker, Nima, on stage, we'll use that time for the audience to hammer you with more questions.
No, the answer is no. What's the question?
The question is, you'll ever leave Romania?
Yeah, hopefully at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, unless I drink too much of your beer.
Okay, good. So there's time for 1 question. Done?
Empathy and mentorship.
Yeah.
The question is if there's no empathy, in such a program.
Correct.
And the empathy, and is now empathy between this, and you don't remark from the beginning because you have not the power. You are at the beginning, and you want to say it's a mentor, it's a very good guy, and you don't say something, don't say something.
So let me tell you a secret. So I completely agree. One of the key ingredients of having a good mentor is actually feeling that when you're speaking to them across the table, that they actually understand what you're going through and your problem. And this is why, don't tell anybody, I keep lawyers and accountants out of the building. Because guess what? They get paid at the end of every month, and they talk about, yeah, startups are great, but they really don't have a really good understanding. There are a few exceptions, but more often than not, we keep them out. But empathy is singularly the biggest, most important part. Actually, there's a really good description. We wrote something that's 2 or 3 years old now called the Mentor Manifesto, which actually gives a list of all of the things that a mentor should do, actually, if they want to come along and help.
Thank you very much. We'll let you go now.
Cheers.
Thanks, John.